Hi and welcome to another 3D printing video. Today what I'm going to talk about is how to level the bed on a DaVinci 1.0a using Repetier Host. Now, I've done a lot of research online over the last week and a half about how to do this, and there's hundreds of different ways to do it. A lot of people do adjustments on it and kind of like adjust it on the fly as it's printing and things. And I figured, this thing's got an auto level sensor. There must be a way you can use science and maths to get this to work. And I've figured it out. So, if you want to follow these steps, it's very simple. All you need is a DaVinci 1.0a 3D printer with Repetier Host 0.92 installed on it. Once you've got that, everything's good to go. You also need Repetier Host on your machine, on your computer, and a version of Slicer as well, of course, because that kind of goes hand in hand. But this is what I did. I went into the menu on the printer and I went through and I chose auto level. Now, this thing takes a determined amount of time to sort out because it can take an awful long time to get the numbers to match. But it does exactly what XYZ where it does. It measures the three corners and it tells you three numbers. And you adjust the controls on the bed to get the three numbers to be as close as possible. Now, you can see here, these are the three numbers that I had after I did my adjustment. It was around about minus 1.5 according to Repetier. So that was fine. So once I did that, I then selected to print a job from just bog standard default Repetier and see what happened. So I went to the printer and it did home all. And when I did home all axes, it went to Z equals minus 1.5, which kind of makes sense because, it's the rounded number of all of the calibrations that it went through. It was minus 1.49, minus what was it? 1.47, So minus 1.5 for a home position is pretty good. So I understood what was going on there. I then started the print and the display moved to Z 0.3. And I thought, that's a bit weird if the home position's minus 1.5. So I did a bit of digging. And this is what I found. When you have a home position, whatever that home position is, minus 1.5, minus 2, whatever it is, when you've done auto level and it sets the home position, that home position means that when the build platform moves to 0, it's going to be about 0.4 millimeters from the extruder head. And it does this auto level and this auto calibration so that that number is fixed. I spent hours and hours and hours trying to change the numbers, did the auto level, and every time when I measured it with a set of feeler gauges, it was always around about 0.4, depending on how level your bed was. Now, the gap at 0.4 when Z equals 0 is important, okay? That means when the bed is at Z0, totally home position, starting at 0, the gap is 0.4 millimeters. Now, what Slicer does is, it asks you what your first layer thickness is. And if I just go to the Repetier Host here, if I hit preview, we'll see that we've got a part loaded in. It's a stand for a Nexus tablet. And if we go to Slicer and then hit the configuration button, hello? Yeah, there we go. The Slicer config pops up. And as you can see, second box down, first layer height 0.3. So when the print starts, it moves the bed from 0, which is 0, to 0.3, because that's what the Slicer G-code's telling it to do. It's saying move down 0.3 and start to print. But because we've done auto calibration, the gap is already set to 0.4, we're now printing at 0.7. And that's not good. I mean, that's just going to print in fresh air, so it's not good. So I can understand why people say, okay, what you need to do is just start your print, kill the power, and then re-level the bed using a piece of card. I don't recommend you do that. I don't recommend you do that at all. This thing has an auto calibration sensor in it for a reason, and we're going to use that sensor. So, we've leveled our bed with the auto calibration sensor, and we've got our offset. So now we know when Z is at 0, the gap between the nozzle is 0.4 millimeters. And what you do is, if you go into the print settings in Slicer, under this tab here, you've got the bed size and the print center, and then you've got something called Zed Offset. Now, Zed Offset is the way to fix this. and it took me hours and hours and hours to figure this out. What Zed Offset does is, it basically says, when Z is at 0, we need to go back, or we need to go forwards by whatever the offset value is. So, let's do the maths. At Z0, we have a gap between the nozzle of the extruder and the bed of 0.4 millimeters. We're going to do, if I go to print settings again, we're going to do a first layer height of 0.3. So when it starts to print, the gap is at 0.4. It's going to go to 0.7. So what we need to do is we need to add an offset. Now, what I did, I fiddled with the offset a little, saw how well the first layer was printing out. And I discovered that an offset of 0.6, sorry, that's a lie, an offset of negative 0.6 millimeters is exactly right to get the first layer nice. Now, my first layer, I've measured it with a calibrator. It comes out about 0.1, 0.15, 0.16, depending on the position of the bed it's at. So it gets really smooshed down to the bed. It's really nice. It sticks really well. If you put a bit of glue on, it's absolutely fine. So what you need to do is you need to calibrate your bed automatically. You need to get the offset set up automatically. Don't then go into Repetier Host and change the EEPROM settings. Just leave it as is. Decide how thick you want your first layer. I recommend 0.3. And then smoosh it right down using the offset till it's about 0.1. But don't forget, that first gap when Z is 0 is 0.4. So you need to take that into account. So if your first layer is 0.3, you need an offset of minus 0.6, which will make your first layer about 0.1-ish. Now, I've been having fantastic results. I ran a 20-hour print yesterday, and it came out and it was absolutely fine. There are a couple of things I've had to do as well. The filament that I'm using, I've had to run it at 225 degrees C, because at 218, 219 degrees, it was starting to break up between the layers. But with Repetier Host, you've got the full functionality of your print. You can do everything with it. So I would highly recommend anybody with a DaVinci 1.0 who doesn't like the XYZ firmware, who wants more control of the printer and better things to do it, go for it. Go for it. Absolutely go for it. One of my other videos has got links to exactly what you do. There's a guy on YouTube who brought up a brilliant tutorial on how you do it. Like I said then, you may not understand what you're doing, but just follow the instructions, do exactly what the guy says, and you will get Repetier Host on your DaVinci. And then if you follow this guide to level the bed using the automatic probe, use the automatic calibration, and then use some simple mathematics to get your Z offset set up and your layer height set up, you'll be printing absolutely brilliant. So as usual, I hope this has been helpful. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I've been Steve. Thanks for listening.